The galaxy had always been a place of wonder and mystery, but it was also a realm ruled by fear. The Aegis were the ones who inspired that fear. Towering beings made of shimmering light and energy, they called themselves the gods of war. For thousands of years, they enforced their idea of order across countless star systems. No one dared to oppose them, not even the most advanced civilizations. But everything changed when a strange signal reached their domain. It came from a small blue planet called Earth, a world barely noticed by the Aegis until now. The signal was unusual, not a plea for help or an act of submission, but something else entirely. It carried fragments of music, images of towering cities, and recordings of voices speaking in defiance. To the Aegis, it was both fascinating and alarming. How could such a young species, still confined to its own solar system, produce something so bold? Zoreth, one of the Aegis envoys, decided it was time to investigate. He was accompanied by Kalis, another envoy known for her sharp mind and cautious nature. Their arrival on Earth was anything but subtle. Two massive ships descended from the sky, glowing like miniature suns as they hovered above the Nevada desert. The ground trembled beneath their weight, and the air crackled with energy. Within minutes, military forces surrounded the area, their weapons pointed at the alien vessels. Among them was Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, a man in his early 30s with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. Daniel wasn't impressed by the display of power. He had seen enough strange things in his career to know that fear was a waste of time. Standing beside him was Dr. Emily Ross, a scientist with curly blonde hair and glasses that framed her curious green eyes. She clutched a tablet tightly, eager to learn more about these visitors. The ships opened, and two figures emerged. They were tall, taller than any human, with forms that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. Their presence was overwhelming, almost suffocating. Zoreth's voice boomed like thunder as he addressed the humans. "We are the Aegis," he said. "Your signal reached us. Explain yourselves." Daniel stepped forward, ignoring the protests of his fellow soldiers. "Explain ourselves," he replied, his tone calm but firm. "You show up out of nowhere, hovering over our planet like you own the place, and you want us to explain ourselves." Emily quickly intervened, sensing the tension rising. "What my colleague means is that we're just as curious about you as you are about us. We sent that signal hoping to make contact, not to start a conflict." Kalis tilted her head, studying the humans carefully. "You are aware that your kind has grown too powerful too quickly. Your weapons could destroy entire worlds. Why should we trust you?" Daniel crossed his arms. "Maybe because we haven't destroyed anything yet. Look, I don't know what kind of gods you think you are, but we're not going to roll over just because you say so." Zoreth's form flickered, a sign of irritation. "Your arrogance will be your downfall." Emily took a step closer, her voice steady. "Or maybe it's our determination to survive. Isn't that what life is all about? Finding ways to keep going, no matter what." For a moment, there was silence. The Aegis exchanged glances, their glowing bodies pulsing faintly. They had expected fear, obedience, or perhaps even hostility. Instead, they found something unexpected, a species that refused to back down. It was unsettling, but also intriguing. Zoreth finally spoke again. "We will observe you further. But know this, if you pose a threat to the galaxy, we will act." With that, the two envoys returned to their ships, which ascended into the sky and disappeared. Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Well, that could have gone worse. Emily nodded, though her expression was thoughtful. "They're scared of us, Daniel. Not just because of our technology, but because of what we represent. They've never seen anything like us before." Daniel frowned. "Let's hope they don't decide to do something about it." As they walked away, neither of them realized how much those words would come to define humanity's future. After the Aegis departed, Daniel and Emily returned to a makeshift command center set up near the site of the encounter. The room buzzed with activity as scientists and military personnel worked tirelessly to analyze every detail of what had just happened. Screens displayed data streams, recordings of the meeting, and maps tracking the movement of the alien ships. Despite the calm exterior he tried to project, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Emily, on the other hand, seemed more focused than ever, her mind racing with possibilities. "Did you notice how they reacted when you stood up to them?" Emily asked as she adjusted her glasses. Her fingers moved quickly over her tablet, pulling up images of Zorath and Callus. They weren't expecting defiance. Most species probably bow down immediately. Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Yeah. Well, maybe we should have played it safe. We don't know what they're capable of, or what they'll do next." Emily shook her head. Playing it safe wouldn't have worked. They needed to see that we're not going to roll over. That's the only language beings like them understand. Strength. Before Daniel could respond, one of the technicians interrupted. "Dr. Ross, Lieutenant Hayes, you need to see this." He pointed to a monitor showing fragments of information extracted from the signal Earth had sent into space. It contained snippets of human history, battles fought, inventions created, and moments of triumph against overwhelming odds. The technician looked uneasy. "It's almost like we were inviting them to judge us." Daniel frowned. "Judge us for what?" "For surviving. For trying to make something out of this rock we call home." Emily studied the screen carefully. Maybe, or maybe they saw it as a challenge. Think about it. They've probably never encountered a species like ours. We adapt, we fight, and even when we fail, we keep coming back stronger. To them, that might look like a threat. As they discussed the implications, tensions began to rise among the team. Some argued that humanity should prepare for war, while others believed diplomacy was still possible. Daniel found himself caught in the middle. He didn't trust the Aegis, but he also knew that starting a conflict with godlike beings would be suicide. Emily, meanwhile, became obsessed with understanding the Aegis better. She spent hours reviewing footage of the encounter, searching for clues about their behavior and motivations. That night, as the base quieted down, Emily stayed behind, poring over files by the dim glow of her laptop. Daniel walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You need to rest," he said, handing her one of the cups. "You won't do anyone any good if you burn yourself out." She smiled faint subconsciously. "I can't stop thinking about them. There's so much we don't know. What if they decide we're too dangerous to exist? What then?" Daniel sighed, sitting down across from her. "Then we'll deal with it. Like we always do. Humanity doesn't give up, remember?" Emily nodded slowly. "But what if they're right to fear us? Look at our history. We've done terrible things to each other, all in the name of progress or survival. Maybe they see that and think we'll do the same to the rest of the galaxy." Daniel hesitated, unsure how to respond. Before he could say anything, an alarm blared through the base. Both jumped to their feet and rushed to the main control room. On the monitors, several new ships were approaching Earth. These weren't the sleek, glowing vessels of Zorath and Callus. They were massive, bristling with weapons, and radiated menace. A voice crackled over the comms, cold and merciless. "This is Commander Valen of the Aegis. Your defiance ends now. Surrender or face annihilation." The room fell silent. Daniel clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. So much for diplomacy. Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This isn't over. Not yet. Outside, the horizon lit up with streaks of light as the Aegis fleet descended. Humanity's greatest test had begun, and no one knew if they were ready for it. The arrival of Commander Valen's fleet sent shockwaves through the base. His ships were larger and more menacing than anything humanity had seen before, their dark hulls blotting out sections of the sky. The air was thick with tension as Daniel and Emily stood in the control room, watching the monitors. Soldiers scrambled to prepare defenses, but everyone knew it was a hopeless fight. The Aegis had technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. Valen's voice echoed again, colder this time. You have been judged unworthy. Your kind spreads chaos wherever it goes. This ends now. Daniel turned to Emily, his face grim. Any ideas? Because I'm fresh out. Emily didn't answer immediately. Her eyes darted across the screens, analyzing every detail of the incoming ships. She noticed something odd, the way they moved in perfect synchronization, almost as if they were connected. It reminded her of how Zoreth and Callus had seemed to communicate without speaking. They're linked, she said finally. Their ships, maybe even their minds. They operate as one. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Okay, great. How does that help us? It means if we can disrupt that connection, we might be able to break them apart. But we'd need to get close enough to plant some kind of device inside their network. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Close enough. Their ships are up there, and we're down here. Unless you've got a secret spaceship lying around, I don't see how that's happening. Before Emily could respond, the first wave of attacks began. Beams of energy rained down from the sky, striking military bases and cities around the world. Chaos erupted as people fled for safety. Back at the base, communication lines buzzed with reports of devastation. Daniel clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. He hated feeling powerless. Meanwhile, Emily worked furiously, trying to piece together a plan. She enlisted the help of Private Rachel Meyer, a young soldier who had shown exceptional skill with technology. Rachel was barely 20, with short brown hair and a quiet determination that belied her age. When Emily explained what she needed, Rachel nodded without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes, she said firmly. As the attacks continued, Daniel led a counteroffensive using everything they had: fighter jets, missiles, and ground forces. It wasn't enough to stop the Aegis, but it bought them time. Emily and Rachel worked nonstop, building a prototype device designed to interfere with the Aegis connection. It was crude and untested, but it was all they had. Days passed in a blur of exhaustion and fear. Civilians huddled in shelters while soldiers fought desperately to protect them. In the midst of the chaos, Zoreth reappeared. His ship descended near the base, drawing fire from human forces until he broadcast a message. This is not our way, he said, his voice carrying both authority and frustration. Valen acts without consent. We did not come here to destroy you. Daniel stepped forward, wary but curious. Then why are you here? To watch us get wiped out. Zoreth hesitated. We came to understand you, to decide whether you deserved a place among the stars. But Valen sees only danger in your defiance. He believes you must be eradicated before you grow stronger. Emily approached cautiously. And what do you believe? Zoreth studied her for a moment. I believe your kind is unlike any we have encountered. You are fragile, yet resilient. You create beauty and destruction in equal measure. Perhaps there is value in observing you further. Daniel crossed his arms. Fat lot of good that does us now. Your buddy Valen isn't interested in observations. Zoreth's form flickered, a sign of unease. I cannot stop him, but I will not aid him either. With that, Zoreth's ship ascended and vanished. Emily turned to Daniel, her expression resolute. If Valen won't listen, then we'll make him. We just need to finish this device and find someone brave enough to use it. Daniel glanced at Rachel, who stood nearby, listening intently. She met his gaze and nodded. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. The final piece of the device was soldered into place late one night. Emily wiped sweat from her forehead and looked at Rachel, who stood ready with a determined expression. The prototype was small, but packed with enough power to disrupt the Aegis connection, if it worked. This is it, Emily said quietly. If we can get this onto one of their ships, it might give us a fighting chance. Daniel walked in, his face lined with exhaustion. He had spent hours coordinating defenses, trying to hold back the relentless attacks from Valen's fleet. Cities were burning, and casualties were mounting. Every moment counted. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, glancing at the device. "It's the only shot we've got," Emily replied. "But someone has to get close enough to plant it. That means sneaking aboard one of their ships." Rachel stepped forward without hesitation. "I'll do it." Daniel frowned. "You're just a kid. This isn't some training exercise. It's suicide." "I know the risks," Rachel said firmly. "But I'm the best choice. I've been studying their tech with Dr. Ross, and I know how to stay under the radar. Besides, someone has to do it." Emily placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder. "She's right, Daniel. She's quick, smart, and she understands the plan better than anyone else." After a long pause, Daniel nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but we're doing everything we can to keep you alive out there." They spent the next few hours preparing. Using scavenged parts from downed Aegis drones, they modified a small spacecraft to mimic the energy signature of the alien fleet. It wouldn't fool them for long, but it might buy Rachel enough time to infiltrate one of the larger ships. As dawn broke, Rachel climbed into the cockpit, clutching the device tightly. "Remember," Emily said, leaning close, "once you're inside, head straight for the core. That's where their connection is strongest. Plant the device and activate it remotely from here." Rachel nodded. "Got it. Don't worry. I won't let you down." With a final glance at Daniel and Emily, she launched the craft into the sky. The Aegis ships loomed above like dark clouds, their weapons firing relentlessly at Earth below. Rachel held her breath as she approached, praying the disguise would hold. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a beam of light enveloped her ship, pulling her aboard one of the massive vessels. Inside, the air hummed with energy. The walls pulsed faintly, as if alive. Rachel moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding patrols of glowing Aegis soldiers. Her heart pounded as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors, guided by the map Emily had created from sensor data. Finally, she reached the core, a massive chamber filled with swirling light and sound. Clutching the device, Rachel planted it against the central console. A warning flashed on her screen. Intrusion detected. Alarms blared, and footsteps echoed in the distance. She activated the device remotely and turned to run, but it was too late. A group of Aegis soldiers blocked her path, their forms shimmering with menace. "You have made a grave mistake," one of them said, its voice cold and mechanical. Rachel raised her hands, knowing escape was impossible, but as she looked back at the device, she saw it begin to glow brighter. "Maybe," she whispered, "but at least I made it count." The device detonated, sending a shockwave through the ship. Lights flickered, and the Aegis soldiers froze, their connection severed. Back on Earth, Emily watched the monitors as the entire fleet faltered, their movements becoming erratic. Daniel let out a shaky breath. It worked. But the victory came at a cost. Rachel's transmission reached them moments later, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "Tell everyone, humanity doesn't give up. Not ever." As the signal cut off, silence fell over the control room. Emily wiped tears from her eyes, while Daniel clenched his fists, vowing silently that Rachel's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had proven something important. Not even the gods of war could break their spirit. The shockwave from Rachel's device rippled through the Aegis fleet, throwing their ships into disarray. Lights flickered, weapons systems faltered, and the once unified movements of the vessels became sluggish and uncoordinated. On Earth, Daniel and Emily watched as the tide of the battle began to shift. The humans, battered but unbroken, seized the opportunity to strike back with everything they had left. Fighter jets screamed across the sky, targeting the weakened alien ships. Ground forces launched coordinated assaults on the few Aegis units that had landed, pushing them back step by step. For the first time since the invasion began, hope flickered in the hearts of those who fought. Daniel stood at the edge of the command center, his eyes locked on the monitors displaying the chaos above. "This is it," he muttered under his breath. "We've got them on the ropes." Emily sat nearby, her hands trembling as she replayed Rachel's final transmission over and over again. The young soldier's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, tell everyone. Humanity doesn't give up. Not ever. Asterisk, it was a reminder of what they were fighting for. Not just survival, but the resilience that defined their species. She forced herself to focus, helping coordinate attacks based on real-time data streaming in from satellites. As the human counteroffensive gained momentum, Valen's frustration grew. His once mighty fleet was crumbling, its power sapped by the disruption of their connection. He appeared on the main screen, his form flickering erratically, a stark contrast to the commanding presence he had displayed earlier. "You insignificant creatures," he roared, his voice distorted with anger. "Do you truly believe this changes anything? You are nothing compared to us." Daniel stepped closer to the monitor, his expression hardening. "Maybe we're nothing to you, but we're something to each other. And that's enough." Valen's response was cut short as another explosion rocked one of his ships. The vessel broke apart, scattering debris across the atmosphere. Cheers erupted in the command center, but Daniel silenced them with a raised hand. "Don't celebrate yet. We're not done." Despite the damage inflicted, the Aegis weren't defeated. Even without their unified connection, their ships still possessed devastating firepower. Civilians continued to flee burning cities, and soldiers fell in droves as they pushed forward. Every victory came at a cost, and the weight of those losses pressed heavily on Daniel and Emily. Back at the base, injured troops streamed in, their faces streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Among them was Private Mark Lewis, a soldier who had been part of Rachel's unit. He limped into the command center, his uniform torn and bloodied. "She did it," he said hoarsely, addressing Daniel and Emily. "Rachel got inside. She saved us all." Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She knew what she was doing. She gave us a chance. Mark clenched his fists, his voice cracking with emotion. "Then let's make sure her sacrifice means something. Let's finish this." With renewed determination, the humans redoubled their efforts. Using stolen Aegis technology, Emily devised a way to amplify the effects of Rachel's device, creating smaller versions that could be deployed directly onto enemy ships. Pilots volunteered for suicide runs, strapping the devices to their crafts and guiding them into the heart of the alien fleet. Each successful hit weakened the Aegis further, chipping away at their dominance. Amidst the chaos, Zorath reappeared. His ship descended cautiously, avoiding conflict as it approached the remnants of the human resistance. When he spoke, his tone was different, less authoritative, more reflective. "Your kind fights with a ferocity I have never seen before," he admitted. "Even now, when faced with annihilation, you refuse to yield." Daniel crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. "That's who we are. We don't back down, no matter how bad things get." Zorath hesitated, then added, "Valen has lost control. His actions are not sanctioned by the rest of us. If you can end this without destroying him entirely, perhaps there is still room for peace." Emily stepped forward, her voice steady despite the turmoil around her. "Peace isn't possible if you keep seeing us as a threat. Humanity isn't perfect, but we're learning. Give us a chance." Before Zorath could respond, another explosion lit up the sky. The battle raged on, but for the first time, the humans felt like they had a real chance. They had proven that even gods could bleed, and that sometimes courage mattered more than power. The battle reached its climax as the human forces launched a final desperate assault on Valen's flagship. The massive vessel loomed above the Earth like a dark storm cloud, its weapons still firing despite the damage it had sustained. Pilots screamed through the sky, their planes loaded with explosives and modified versions of Rachel's device. Each run was a gamble, a suicide mission that required perfect timing and nerves of steel. Daniel stood in the command center, his face pale but resolute. He watched the monitors as one pilot after another made their approach, dodging enemy fire and planting the devices on the hull of the flagship. Explosions lit up the darkness, sending shockwaves through the alien ship. Keep going, he urged the remaining pilots over the comms. We're almost there. Emily worked alongside him, her hands flying over the controls as she coordinated the attacks. Her voice wavered slightly, but she didn't stop. One more hit should do it, she said, pointing to a weak spot near the core of the ship. If we can breach that section, we might take out the entire fleet. Among the pilots was Captain Jordan Reed, a seasoned flyer known for his calm under pressure. His plane was battered, smoke trailing behind him as he lined up for the final run. Over the radio, his voice came through steady and clear. "This is Reed. I'm going in." "No, you're not," Daniel snapped, recognizing the tone of someone prepared to sacrifice themselves. "Pull back. We'll find another way." "There isn't time," Reed replied simply. "Tell my family I did what I had to." Before anyone could argue further, Reed accelerated, weaving through a barrage of enemy fire. At the last second, he ejected, his parachute opening just as his plane slammed into the target. The explosion was massive, engulfing the flagship in flames and sending debris raining down toward Earth. The screen in the command center flickered, and then went dark. For a moment, there was silence. Then cheers erupted as the remaining Aegis ships began to retreat, their formations breaking apart. Emily sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. "They're leaving." Daniel let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging with relief, but the victory felt hollow. Too many lives had been lost. Rachel, Reed, countless others whose names would never be forgotten. He turned to Emily, his voice heavy. "We won, but at what cost?" As the survivors regrouped, Zorath appeared once more. His ship descended slowly, its glowing form casting an eerie light over the battlefield. This time, he spoke directly to Daniel and Emily. "You have proven yourselves," he said, his voice softer than before. "Your courage and ingenuity are unmatched. Perhaps there is wisdom in your defiance." Emily stepped forward, her expression cautious. "Does that mean you'll leave us alone? Or is this just a pause before the next attack?" Zorath hesitated. Valen has been removed from command. His actions were reckless and unjustified. "As for the rest of us, we will observe you further. But know this, if you ever pose a true threat to the galaxy, we will act." Daniel crossed his arms, his tone firm. "Fair enough. But remember something. We don't start fights, but we sure as hell finish them." Zorath's form flickered, a hint of respect in his glowing presence. "That is why you are feared, even by gods. Farewell, humans." With that, his ship ascended into the sky, disappearing along with the remnants of the Aegis fleet. The war was over, but its scars would remain for generations. Cities lay in ruins, families were torn apart, and the pain of loss weighed heavily on everyone who had fought. In the days that followed, humanity began to rebuild. Rachel's sacrifice became a symbol of hope and resilience, her name spoken with reverence. Emily returned to her research, determined to ensure that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Daniel took on a new role, mentoring young soldiers and teaching them the lessons he had learned on the battlefield. Though the Aegis were gone, their words lingered in the minds of those who had faced them. Humanity had stared down gods and refused to kneel. It was a victory born not from power, but from spirit, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage and determination could change the course of history. And somewhere, among the stars, the Aegis watched, wondering if they had truly understood the species they had sought to judge. Years passed since the war with the Aegis, and Earth slowly began to heal. The scars of battle remained, crumbling buildings, abandoned cities, and memorials dedicated to those who had fallen. But life went on. Humanity had proven its strength, not just to the Aegis but to itself. People rebuilt their homes, planted new crops in fields that had been scorched, and told stories of heroes like Rachel Meyer and Captain Jordan Reed to remind themselves of what they were capable of. Daniel Hayes settled into a quieter life after leaving the military. He spent his days mentoring young leaders at an academy established to train the next generation of soldiers and strategists. Though he rarely spoke about the war, his lessons carried echoes of it. Courage isn't about being fearless, he often said. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you're scared. Emily Ross, meanwhile, devoted herself to science. She worked tirelessly in a top-secret lab, studying the fragments of Aegis technology left behind after the battle. Her goal was simple: to ensure humanity would never again face such a threat unprepared. Late nights became her routine as she pored over data, running simulations and experiments. Sometimes she found herself thinking about Zoreth's parting words, how humanity was feared, even by gods. It wasn't a title she cherished, but it was a truth she couldn't ignore. One evening, as Emily sat in her lab surrounded by glowing monitors, Daniel stopped by. They hadn't seen much of each other since the war ended, but their bond remained strong. "Still working late?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. Emily glanced up, smiling faintly. "Some things never change. What about you? How are the cadets?" "They're eager," Daniel replied, stepping inside. "But they don't really understand what we went through. To them, it's just history." "Maybe that's for the best," Emily said softly. "They shouldn't have to carry the weight of what happened. Not yet." Daniel nodded, looking around the cluttered lab. "You think the Aegis will come back?" "I don't know," Emily admitted, "but I can't take that chance. If they do return, we need to be ready." Her words hung in the air as both fell silent, lost in thought. The war had changed them, shaping who they were now. For Daniel, it was a reminder of the cost of survival. For Emily, it was a driving force, a need to protect humanity from future threats. Outside, the world continued to move forward. Children played in parks where battles had once raged, and families gathered around dinner tables to share laughter and stories. Memorials stood tall in city squares, honoring those who had given everything. Among them was a statue of Rachel Meyer, her figure holding the device she had sacrificed for life to deploy. Beneath it, an inscription read, ** in defiance of fear, in service of hope. *. Rachel's family visited the memorial often, leaving flowers and letters beside it. Mark Lewis, who had served alongside her, sometimes joined them. He had left the military after the war, choosing instead to teach history at a local school. His classes always included a lesson on the battle against the Aegis, not just the tactics or technology, but the courage and resilience that had defined humanity's victory. Far beyond Earth, the Aegis watched silently. Zoreth had shared his observations with the others, describing humanity's ferocity, creativity, and refusal to surrender. Some among the Aegis still believed humans were too dangerous to exist, while others argued they were proof that life could thrive in unexpected ways. Valen's defeat had shifted the balance, forcing the Aegis to reconsider their role as arbiters of the galaxy. For now, they kept their distance, content to observe rather than intervene. But Zoreth couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's story was far from over. In the vastness of space, Earth shone like a spark, a fragile yet unyielding light that refused to fade. And though the Aegis saw themselves as gods, they couldn't deny the power of a species that fought not just to survive, but to live. As the years stretched into decades, humanity moved forward, carrying the lessons of the past into an uncertain future. They had faced gods and lived to tell the tale, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope could prevail. Decades passed, and humanity continued to grow. The lessons of the war with the Aegis became part of their history, taught in schools and remembered in stories shared around campfires. Earth flourished once more, its cities rebuilt and its people united by the memory of what they had overcome. But even as life moved forward, the shadow of the Aegis lingered, a reminder that the galaxy was vast and full of mysteries. Daniel Hayes grew older, his hair streaked with gray, but his spirit remained strong. He spent his days writing memoirs about the war, sharing not just the battles but the courage and sacrifices of those who had fought. "We didn't win because we were stronger," he often said during interviews. "We won because we refused to give up." That's something worth remembering. Emily Ross never stopped working. Her research led to breakthroughs in technology. Inspired by the fragments of Aegis design she had studied for years, she helped develop new forms of energy, faster spacecraft, and tools that allowed humanity to explore farther into space than ever before. Though her work brought her fame, she remained humble, always crediting Rachel and the others who had given everything for the chance to survive. One evening, as Emily stood on a balcony overlooking a launch pad, she watched a rocket ascend into the sky. It carried explorers bound for distant stars, the first mission of its kind since the war. Humanity was stepping beyond its solar system, driven by curiosity and hope. Beside her stood Daniel, leaning on a cane but smiling as the ship disappeared into the clouds. "They're going out there," he said quietly. "What do you think they'll find?" Emily shrugged, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "I don't know. Maybe friends, maybe enemies. But whatever it is, I think we're ready." Far away among the stars, Zorath observed the launch through shimmering screens. Decades had passed for humanity, but for the Aegis, time flowed differently. To them, it felt like mere moments since their encounter with Earth. Zorath replayed footage of the war. The defiance in Daniel's voice, the determination in Emily's eyes, the sacrifice of Rachel Meyer. Each moment reinforced what he had come to believe. Humanity was unlike any species they had ever encountered. The other Aegis debated endlessly about whether humans posed a threat or an opportunity. Some argued that their rapid advancement made them dangerous. Others saw potential in their resilience and creativity. Zorath listened to both sides but kept his own counsel. He knew one thing for certain: humanity's story was far from over. Back on Earth, the descendants of those who had fought the Aegis carried their legacy forward. Rachel's statue stood tall in cities across the globe, a symbol of bravery and selflessness. Children learned her name alongside those of great leaders and inventors, reminded that even ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. As the rocket traveled deeper into space, it passed through regions once patrolled by the Aegis. For now, the galaxy seemed quiet, unthreatening. But humanity understood that peace was fragile and danger could emerge when least expected. They were prepared this time, not just with weapons and technology, but with the knowledge that unity and courage could overcome even the greatest odds. Zorath turned away from the screens, his glowing form flickering faintly. Perhaps, he murmured to himself, the true test of a species isn't how they wield power, but how they endure. Humanity has much to teach us, all of us. Among the stars, humanity's journey continued. They faced challenges, made mistakes, and celebrated victories, just as they always had. And though the Aegis watched silently, waiting to see what would happen next, one truth remained clear: humanity was no longer afraid of the gods of war or of the unknown. They had proven themselves capable of standing firm against anything the universe might throw their way. In the end, it wasn't strength or fearlessness that defined them. It was their refusal to stop fighting for a better future. That was their legacy, written not in stone, but in the endless possibilities of the cosmos.